to speak on education for sustainable development during and post-pandemic. I'm really thankful to express my views on this current problem and related to education specifically. Thank you so much, Dr. Varun Gulati. First, I'll be covering these topics in my entire presentation. That is, effect on pandemic on education, role of academia in gauging and mitigating the effect, SDG, Sustainable Development Goal for Education, UNGA recognition education for sustainable development, shortfalls and remedies, turning crisis into opportunity, the way ahead. I hope I'm audible perfectly for everyone. Okay, thank you so much. To start with, I'll start with effect of pandemic on education, right? So when you see this effect, impact of COVID-19 pandemic on education, we can see with this global map, we can see that this has affected our education system worldwide, leading to the near total closure of schools and colleges and universities. Most of the governments worldwide temporarily closed education institutions in an attempt to contain the spread of COVID-19. As of 7th June 2020, this is from that particular site. So it says approximately 1.725 billion learners are currently affected due to school closures in response to the pandemic. As per the UNICEF monitoring, 134 countries are currently implementing nationwide closures and 38 are implementing local closures, impacting about 98.5% of the world's student populations. Schools are currently open only in 39 countries. Okay. When you talk about this impact of COVID-19 pandemic on education, the first thing that is a shift from thinking digital to being digital. See, the school closures impact not only the students, teachers, and families, but have far-reaching economic and societal consequences. The school closure in response to the pandemic have shed light on various social and economic issues, including student debt, digital learning, food insecurity, homelessness, as well as access to childcare, healthcare, housing, internet, and disability services. The impact was more severe for disadvantaged children and their families, causing interrupted learning and compromised nutrition, childcare problems, and consequent economic cost to families who could not work. In response to school closures, UNESCO recommended use of distance learning programs and open educational applications, platforms that schools and teachers can use to reach learners remotely and limit the disruption of education. When you talk about role of academia in gauging and mitigating the effect, now here I'll talk in detail for each point, like inequality among children, children brought into sharp focus. On this, I would like to focus here more on school-going children are the most worst affected education sector stakeholders. They are the worst affected. For them, lockdown doesn't just mean a reduced cash flow or a professional setback. It represents an interruption to their learning journey, especially for at-risk children who struggled to get an education at the best of times. The lockdown aggravated deep-set class and social differences, especially between private and public school systems. The Indian government spends just 4.6% of its GDP on education, which is much lower than the sub-Saharan countries like Kenya, Togo, and Zimbabwe. At the best of times, access to education is a critical challenge faced by young people across the country. According to the study of International Journal for Innovative Research in Multidisciplinary Field, that is IGIRMF, Class 1 school enrollment increased by staggering 30% after the midday meal scheme was implemented. This implies that access to food, much less access to education, is a key driving force behind the school enrollment. These students almost certainly do not have access to digital learning facilities at home. This means that for millions of Indian students, the lockdown has brought all education to a complete halt. On the other hand, a minority of students attending urban private schools are seeing their education continue through standard digital platforms. While e-learning is still in its nascent stages, students and teachers at these institutions have the technology and the wherewithal to use video conferencing, email, and other technologies to continue their learning experience. When you talk of lack of readiness and infrastructures for teachers, here I would like to highlight teachers across the countries are scrambling to find ways to continue teaching in a situation where physical contact is no longer possible. Again, class and social divides play a big role in determining how successful teachers are in teaching school children during the pandemic. Teachers at the country's premier private schools are tech savvy. Most have access to the internet at the home as well as other digital infrastructures required to craft and share course materials. Unfortunately, this is not the case when it comes to the vast majority of teachers in the country. Nearly 1 in 5 primary school teaching positions is vacant today. Even in better times, many schools in rural India were run by just a single teacher. So according to the World Bank, only half of India's teachers are actually teaching on any given day because of sky-high teacher absence rates. When a large number of teachers don't even teach when schools are open, it is hard to imagine better outcome when schools are under lockdown. So this a scenario. Now, how this e-learning impacting already burdened parents? See, according to crime, the poverty and availability, there are major reasons behind schools dropouts in India. Poverty, the first reasons, attributes is to a family problem. Children who go to school are unable to help their parents out in the farm or at the shop. This makes many parents reluctant supporters of schooling at the best of times. It is not clear how the parents of school children, especially in rural areas, are reacting to the lockdown. Many of them are now unemployed and quickly are running out of limited savings. They are already in a debt. This could mean that when lockdown lifts, many parents might compel their kids to drop out to help support the family financially. The lockdown presents problems even to wealthier parents in urban areas, specifically nowadays. They have to help children set up e-learning stations at home, monitor them round the clock, and deal with the stress and tantrums. Now, when you talk about school owners, the small school owners specifically, there are huge cash crunch and survival woes. The school owners are going to see a major cash crunch, major cash flow crunch, you can say, because of the pandemic. Many schools operate with monthly fee structures. If the lockdown continues, these payments will dry up, of course. However, expenses including rent, salaries, other costs will stay at the same place. Many education institutions are run as not-for-profit, so they generate minimal profits. This means that by and large, they lack the cash reserves to deal with an exhausted shutdown. Smaller schools around the country might shut down permanently, even in the small areas. The school owners will be faced to downsize and renegotiate for rentals since this lockdown is like a washout year. Petitions and PILs against the schools under these circumstances are adding on to their woes. So when you see all these crunches, let's also analyze what are the government plans, which are very, very unclear as of now. The Indian government has done, though, commendable job enforcing lockdown. However, little has been said to date about the government education sector, specifically the strategy I'm talking about. The government is taking time to deliberate on a strategy, having a clearer idea of what it plans to do could help educators and school owners around the country, though some unofficial reports indicate schools may open by 1st of October. That is again an unofficial one, which would mean a good part of the year will be lost. There is no news on financial support to schools, while petitions and PLs are backed by politicians against schools' interest keep growing. The COVID-19 pandemic is hitting everyone hard, but schools, which have always been placed for real life physical interactions, have been among the hardest hit. Schools are under lockdown. And in India, the technology solution to challenge seem limited at present to the premier urban-centric institutions only. But if lockdown and education downturn continue, there is a real pressing need for innovators to come up with the technologies to help Indians learn remotely, especially in the most remote and vulnerable parts of the country. Not much has changed in this sector, sir. For almost 2 centuries, maybe this was just a wake-up call, you can say that, that was needed. This is not the time to wait and then let the tide pass. We all should work, rise, and re-engineer the education sector for benefit of all the stakeholders. This is my submission regarding impact of COVID-19. When you talk about SDG for education, here again, I'll talk about a learning crisis. So even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was living, or you can say, a learning crisis. Before pandemic, 258 million children and youth of primary and secondary school age were out of school. Low schooling quality meant many who were in the school learned very little. The learning poverty rate in low middle income countries was just 53%, meaning over the half of all 10-year-old children couldn't even read and understand a simple age appropriate story. So even worse, the crisis was not equally again distributed. The most disadvantaged children and youth had the worst access to schooling, highest dropout rates, and the largest learning deficit. This I'm talking before COVID-19. All these means that world has already far off track for meeting Sustainable Development Goal 4, which commits all nations to ensure that among other ambitious targets, all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education. The COVID-19 pandemic now threatens to make education outcomes even more worse. So this is something very, very, very alarming. Now, when you talk about social equity, which is again and part of a learning crisis, the pandemic will reshape the future of higher education. The university with a solid balance sheet, a low debt level, sufficient cash reserves, led by a team of experts in higher education who are equipped with the knowledge and experiences and risk management might be among the final winners, or they might be only in the platform. When you talk about change, it will have a very devastating effect on the education, social responsibility, and sustainability practices, firm performances, and corporate governance. Therefore, it is an absolute must to know the responses and the impacts and how business and organizations are dealing with their sustainability initiatives and practices in this unprecedented and challenging time. Am I audible? When you talk about academic research further, which is again a part of SDG, despite size of macro and microeconomic shocks, the academic research on these issues is just its infancy. while the debate in the media is far, far, far from conclusive in such times of uncertainty. Now, how to counter those shocks and turn crisis into opportunity? Rebuild education to create change makers ready for global challenges. Education should make us resilient to situations like this current pandemic and the climate crisis. So here I'll just quickly talk about the shortfalls and remedies. See, when I talk about role of academia, generally there are very high societal expectations of academia to contribute to sustainability, science, advocacy, and education. Fundamental changes to our way of living are required due to global threats like climate change, resource scarcity, malnutrition, etc. For us, like this thing, universities have responsibilities to use their own knowledge and independence to work towards positive change in the human conditions. Academia should not be purely academic, it should be applied towards creating a better world. When you talk about role of government, amongst many institutions, schools have also shifted their base to virtual platforms to conduct classes online. Consequently, catering to the needs of all stages of education from pre-primary to university level, online education has emerged as an alternative to ordinary face-to-face classes. Accordingly, various stakeholders, such as government and private organizations, are trying their best to assist each other by sprucing up their existing online platforms, apps, and providing training to teachers to use these apps and platforms to the maximum level, or I can say optimum level. Moreover, efforts are also being made by both government and non-government organizations and edtech companies. They are all coming together to support the school system to make a smooth transition in the virtual world. But still, upskilling and motivating teachers, organizing counseling sessions for stakeholders, such as teachers, parents, and students, are some of the important measures taken by the administration in the recent past. Making this continuous effort to provide customized teaching learning material suitable for online classes is another way of facilitating schooling of children. Recently, the central government has launched PM e-Vidya platform with 12 new DTH channels, one for each class to reach out all strates of society. These efforts have proved beneficial to sizable chunk of the school going population, but this is again very limited. When you talk about this role of industry, future expectations of services will undergo paradigm shift as work and personal life boundaries, locations merge. Each industry sectors, they have to look at their business's life cycle in the new normal and adapt a fast solutions for moving from face-to-face selling, onboarding and servicing to digital and remote collaboration tools and documentation, which will require complete retraining of value chain. That is, you can say learning, unlearning, again relearning. Yeah. A framework to digital enable and empower these businesses during this critical time needs to be set up. When you say education 4.0 is completely changing the game of education by easing the way of e-learning and improving our technical skills at the same time. This means teaching students about this technology as a part of curriculum, changing the approach to learning altogether, and utilizing this technology to better improve the university experiences. Education 4.0 has characterized by responding to the needs of man-machine alignment to satisfy the needs to develop globally competitive learners. Education 4.0 helps to develop the basic four C's. Four C's can say critical thinking. Now, critical thinking, it is basically looking at the problems in novel ways of associating learning subjects across the discipline. When you say second C, communication, very effective one. It has to be sharing thoughts, ideas, questions, experiences, and solutions. When you say collaboration, it is working together to reach common goal, putting experiences plus talent plus smart work. These all things have to go together. That is what collaboration. It's not only the collaboration between this, but these all have to go together. When you say creativity, this is again attempting a new approach through innovation plus invention, which puts or which includes, you can say, hands-on project-based learning, or secondly, the most important one, which is upcoming, that is artificial intelligence, that is speech recognition plus visual purpose perceptions and so on. So these are all very, very important when you talk about this. When you say turning crisis into opportunity, the way ahead, I will just quickly highlight redrawing the curriculum, skill development, again, defining education 4.0, bridging the digital divide, leveraging social media to augment education, and maximizing use of AI. So these are all very bullet points, highlights that I would like to add on here, and achieving global interconnectedness. To conclude, I'll say that COVID-19 crisis leads us to question some of the fundamental assumptions about ourselves and our lives. When it comes to education, we need to strengthen an approach that promotes the well-being of people and the planet. When you need education that goes beyond providing basic knowledge and skills and leads the awareness, ideas, and actions that helps us advance towards sustainable development. Education for sustainable development empowers learners to transform themselves and transform societies. This transformation is an urgent, and let us not squander this opportunity to change learning bill and build a better world. Thank you very much. I would like to go for question and answer sessions. I would like to have more of interactive sessions. That's why I've squeezed my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to hear any questions that I would like to take. Any questions?
Okay.
I would like to have more of interactive sessions, so that's why I had to
Yeah.
choose.
So we can have now question answers.
Yes.
Dhaneshwar has raised his hand. Dhaneshwar is a PDF scholar in DIC. Dhaneshwar.
Okay. I'm open for any questions that you have on this.
Dhaneshwar, please unmute yourself. Dhaneshwar, can you unmute yourself?
Good afternoon, ma'am.